Okay, good morning, everyone. This is Zen Honeycutt from Moms Across America. I'm here today to talk to you about the Beyond Pesticides Conference, which I just went to this past weekend in Portland, Oregon for the first time ever. Never thought I'd be excited about a pesticide conference, but when you're committed to health and freedom and healthy children, that is something that is very exciting to go to. And I want to thank Lori Grace from Environmental Art and Research for funding my plane ticket to go up there. Very excited to be able to share this information with you today, because when we're empowered, we can do something about it. So first of all, the Beyond Pesticide Conference was an amazing collaboration of many different organizations. There were speakers all day long, all night Friday night, Pesticide 101. There was an EPA speaker as well. I'm going to do Pesticide 101 in just a moment. We're going to go through the slideshow, and that's from Caroline Cox from the Center of Environmental Health. But I want to touch on a few of the other things that happened at the conference, which will be in my blog later, either this afternoon or tomorrow. And that is Poison Spring by E.G. Valientos, is a man that worked at the EPA from 1979 to 2004. And this is basically a whistleblowing book about the corruption in the back end of the EPA. And it's very, very disturbing, but also very enlightening. And it's very inspiring that people are standing up and speaking out and saying now is the time for us to revamp the EPA, for us to stand up about poisons in our environment. Because if we had listened to Rachel Carson, which you can see, this is a movie, A Sense of Wonder, which is featured at the Beyond Conference, and the Beyond Pesticides Conference. If we'd listened to Rachel Carson, then none of this would be happening now. She wrote her book in 1962 called Silent Spring, and you want to check that out, all about pesticides. Just two other things to touch on is that if you want to find out more information about the glyphosate testing report, which was put out April 7th by Moms Across America and Sustainable Pulse, it looks like this. You can go to our website and see it under Moms Across America blog and data. And you can see a blog about it. You can see scientists' comments about it. And you can see the very disturbing information that glyphosate has been found in 3 out of 10 of women's breast milk in a pilot study of 10 moms. And keep in mind that 9 out of 10 of those moms were actively avoiding GMOs and glyphosate. And the detectable level was 75 parts per billion, which had us think we wouldn't be able to detect any glyphosate at all, that hopefully the levels would be below that. But 3 of the moms tested above that at 76 parts per billion, 99 parts per billion, and 166 parts per billion. And this is 3 times higher than pigs that had glyphosate tested and found and detected in their urine. And those pigs happen to have 5 times the level of miscarriages, birth defects, and smaller litters. So that pig farmer, a Danish pig farmer named Ib, said that he was astounded that the women that had this level of glyphosate in their breast milk could reproduce at all. So it's very disturbing news, but the good news is that this pilot study has secured funding for further testing, a real scientific study. I'm so thrilled. We have European scientists and American scientists working together, and it'll start very soon. And we are thrilled to have a scientific study to be funded by an angel out there. And working with Henry Rollins from Sustainable Pulse has been just amazing. So without further ado, we're going to get on to our Pesticide 101. This is the Center for Environmental Health slideshow about 10 reasons not to use pesticides from Caroline Cox. And she very generously shared this with us. She's been working on pesticides, glyphosate, and inert ingredients for many, many years, and she is very generous to share this with us. Number 1 reason why not to use pesticides is because pesticides don't solve pest problems. If you think about it, it kills the pest, but that doesn't prevent them from coming back. And we have, in fact, used 527 million more pounds of pesticides since GMOs were invented within the past 20 years. Now, overall pesticide use, you can see here, has decreased a tiny bit, but you need to take into account that pesticides are now currently being put in our food rather than being sprayed on the outside of our food. So there is, in fact, an increase of pesticides. It's just that they're being put in our food, called the Bt toxin, as well as sprayed on the outside of our food in the form of Roundup, which is the active chemical ingredient glyphosate, and many, many other forms of pesticides, including neonicotinoids, which was heavily covered in this conference because we are now finding they are responsible for the bee die-off. And I'll get more into neonicotinoids in a little bit. The point is, if pesticides really solve the pest problems, we wouldn't use them repeatedly. So there are billions of pounds of pesticides used per year, and they just simply don't work. So how do you get rid of pests? The way you get rid of pests is to keep pests out. You use screens, you caulk the sides of the windows and your walls, you make sure to have these little rubber bands on the bottom of doors, and you use things called escutcheons, which go around pipes between your wall and your pipe to keep critters out from climbing into the little space that inevitably needs to be made to put a pipe through your wall and do your plumbing. So you want to make sure to get those rubber bands on the bottom of your doors and escutcheons and caulk. You can also keep pest food out of reach by putting it in jars and by putting pet food away after you feed your pets, because that will inevitably attract pests. You also want to, in your home, use bathroom fans. When you dry out the environment, then pests are not attracted to the water. In many cases, ants and cockroaches and different kinds of pests are just as attracted to the water in your house, especially when it's hot and dry out, as they are to the food crumbs which may be left around your home. So you want to use bathroom fans and make sure to fix leaks. If there's anything leaking under your sink, you will attract pests. The other things to do is to clean more often and carefully than usual. Make sure to vacuum, get up those crumbs, and make sure to scrub. You also want to use helpful insects to eat pest insects. For instance, ladybugs are very useful in any garden to get rid of pests. In your gardens or farms, you also want to use compost to build healthy soil. Healthy soil grows a healthy plant. And according to farmers, specifically Bob Streit that I spoke to recently, he said that plants actually send out energy just like an animal does. And the world exists under the physics law of survival of the fittest. So a antelope will sort of call a lion to eat it when it's weak and sick by its actions of being weak and sick and lingering behind the rest of the pack. So it will attract a lion to eat it and eliminate the weakest. And a plant does the same thing. When a plant is weak and sick, it wilts, it withers, and it actually sends out a message to pests to eliminate it, therefore having the strongest of the plants survive. So many people don't realize that the way to get rid of pests is actually take care of the soil, not spray pesticides all over the plant, which will in turn weaken it and cause more and increased pests. So the problem is not the pest, the problem is unhealthy soil. So use compost and make sure it's organic compost to build a healthy soil. You want to use varieties with fewer pest problems. You can ask your local gardeners or nursery departments about which ones are best for your local environment for fewer pest problems. You want to grow green manure crops to build healthy soil. These are called cover crops. If you're a small farmer, you want to make sure in between your seasons to grow other crops which help to put nutrition into the soil. Also growing diverse crops. You want to have rows of kale and then onion and then lettuce, different rows of different plants, then therefore decrease the spread and the proliferation of pests. Diversity just works in any environment. So the number 2 reasons to not use pesticides is because pesticides are hazardous to our health, particularly children. Even the U.S. EPA agrees that adverse effects of pesticides exposure range from mild symptoms of dizziness and nausea to serious long-term neurological, developmental, and reproductive disorders. And this is, again, by the EPA, US EPA. They agree. One of the biggest pesticides is glyphosate, which is in Roundup. It's the most widely used herbicide in the world, and there's an estimated use of 190 million pounds per year, and this is by the EPA. They stopped rating this back in 1990, and since then it has been reported that pesticide use has increased 26% per year. So we're really not even aware of the exact amount that's being used right now. But the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health states that glyphosate is a mutagen, meaning it damages genes, and it is a reproductive effector, meaning it causes birth defects. You want to keep in mind that this chemical has now been found in our rainwater, in our air, in our drinking water, in our urine of our children and our citizens in America, and in our breast milk of mothers across America. And this fact should be frightening to everyone, because for a child to be drinking a mutagen and a birth, something which can cause birth defects at the earliest stages of life is just not humane. It's not sane, it doesn't make any sense, and it's not worth any amount of money in the world. So there are other chemicals as well, which are highly toxic. There's in fact 80,000 chemicals that have been invented since the 1940s. One of the most widely used insecticides is chlorpyrifos. I'm not sure if I got that right. But anyway, it's used at the rate of 11 million pounds per year. It is also a mutagen and a reproductive effector. There's also chlorothalonil, and it's used at 9 million pounds per year. It's a fungicide, the most widely used fungicide. It is a mutagen, a reproductive effector, and also causes cancer. This is important to note that when you kill the fungus in the soil, you also increase the ability for bad bacteria, bad molds, and other bad fungi to increase, and those particles are then on our food and harvested and we ingest them, as well as the pesticides. They don't wash off. So the third reason not to use pesticides is pesticides can cause special problems for children. For their size, children drink more water and eat more food than adults do. Their play exposes them to pesticides. They play on the fields, at schools, and in playgrounds where they regularly spray glyphosate. I would encourage everyone watching this to please ask your city council, ask your school principal, do you spray Roundup or any chemicals on our playgrounds or on our parks? There are moms all across America, for instance, Megan from NCAP, from Northwestern Center for Action for Pesticides, I believe it is, that got her local park to go pesticide free. She organized for some people to come in, volunteers to come in to pull weeds, and she has been successful in keeping pesticides out of her park for 3 years, and we hope to have her on for a Google Hangout to talk more about that later. But keep in mind that children are also growing and developing at a much faster rate than we are, and the pesticides impact the very building blocks of their entire foundation of their well-being for the rest of their lives. The important thing that I learned about epigenetics at this pesticide conference, which we can talk more about later, is that the timing of the exposure to a human being and an infant and a fetus of pesticides is perhaps even more critical than the actual pesticide itself. But because the timing is when certain things are being built and developed in the human body. For instance, a certain stage in pregnancy when the brain is being developed. There's a certain stage in pregnancy when the nervous system is being developed, or the eyesight, or the structure of the heart. And if you introduce toxic chemicals during that time, you could be impacting not only that infant, but 4 generations. Proven 4 generations into the future. So it is extremely crucial for pregnant women to eat organic food and to avoid toxins in their home, in their household products, in their gardens, and in their environment as much as possible. The fourth reason not to use pesticides is because pesticides often contaminate food. Here's the contamination of common fruits and vegetables. More than half contain more than one pesticide or at least one pesticide. And this is testing done by the USDA in 2012. Now, what this doesn't show is that some fruits and vegetables, like apples, for instance, it was on Dr. Oz recently, that apples had at least 19 different pesticides. Some reports of strawberries had shown hundreds of pesticides, like 254 or something like that, different types of pesticides. And why this is important is because no one is studying the outcome of the cocktail of pesticides. What is the result when you have, 5, 6, 7, 200 different toxic chemicals mixing together? What other kind of chemicals do they create? And what is the result of that toxicity? No one knows. And so any fruit or vegetable which is not organic, as you see here, has a more than 50-50 chance of having more than one or at least one pesticide, which is most likely been untested to an extent, any extent, on human beings. The other thing is that there are pesticide surprises. 97% of tangerines tested positive with at least one pesticide recently, and 76% of peach baby food samples tested positive with at least one pesticide. This is not information that's on the label. This is not information that moms would ever think to, try to find out when they're buying their food in the grocery store. The fifth reason why you should not use pesticides is pesticides are particularly hazardous for farmers and farm workers. There have been extensive studies now. One is from this organization, Chamacos, cohort study findings of health outcomes, and this is from cerch.org. There was an extensive study which showed mothers' exposure to insecticides linked with shorter pregnancies, newborns with poor reflexes, lower scores on children's IQ tests, and higher risk of ADHD. Now, why this is so important is because 90% of our crops in the U.S. now of soy and corn, 100% of sugar beets, and many more crops, including canola, some zucchini, and yellow squash, are genetically modified. And what that means is that they are genetically modified in most cases to withstand pesticide, or they are themselves a pesticide. So these pesticides are being delivered to human beings through GMOs. So GMOs are a pesticide delivery system to human beings and to babies. And this is the result right here: shorter pregnancies, poor reflexes, lower scores on IQ tests, and higher risk of ADHD, amongst other things which we saw earlier, like reproductive harm. This is the result of our crops being genetically engineered to withstand pesticides, or to be a pesticide. This is absolutely unacceptable, and why moms call for a moratorium on GMOs immediately. And immediate labeling, of course, so we can choose how to take care of our children. The one other thing I want to mention about the IQ tests is, you may think only 5 points on an IQ test doesn't make a difference, but 20 years ago, we were on a steady incline of IQ. People in America were getting smarter, our children were getting smarter, and we were expanding in our technology, in our industry, and everything like that. We were on the incline. But something happened 20 years ago, and we suggested the introduction of these chemicals and pesticides, which has been impacting the IQ. And now, instead of 6 million people who have mental incapacitation or brain damage or behavioral problems due to mental problems and IQ problems, we now have 9 million. So it's gone from 6 to 9 million people just because of a few points on IQ tests that we can tell the difference between mentally incapacitated people. Huge difference. There was also an agricultural health study which showed a 15-year collaboration between federal agencies with an increase of cancer, asthma, diabetes, depression, heart attacks, and other health problems They are more common with farmers who use pesticides. And you need to take a look at, and we'll post it on the website as well, but there was an article just last week out, I believe it was by Newsweek, that showed that farmers all across America, there's been an increase of suicides by farmers, and they cite depression as the #1 reason. And you can see here, it being linked to pesticide, that this is of utmost concern to us because we need 100,000 more farmers in America in order to keep up with the demand for food. We don't need farmers killing themselves. We don't need to lose this, incredible, incredible group of human beings which are tirelessly and generously devoting their entire lives to the well-being of other people by farming and growing food for us. We need to support our farmers, and we need to stop this chemical pollution of their bodies, which is in turn resulting in these health problems. The #6 reason why not to use pesticides is pesticides are hazardous to pets. This is just, it's been proven and it's been shown that spot-on flea and tick products have reported in 2008 that spot-on treatments cause vomiting, diarrhea, hair loss, skin ulcers, lethargy, seizures, and death. Pets, lawn care, and cancer. You can see that this particular Scottish Terrier was studied because they were coming in with a particularly high rate of cancer, and this scientist Glickman did a study and showed that herbicide exposure and the risk of transitional cell carcinoma in the urinary bladder of Scottish Terriers, it looked like it increased more than 3 times when they were exposed to pesticides in the grass outside of their homes. So if you care about any pets at all, we strongly advise that you stop the spraying of any pesticides in your gardens, your dog parks, your schools, your gardens, and your outdoor areas. And even the sidewalks is very important as well. The #7 reason why not to use pesticides is because pesticides contaminate water. We've seen this globally. In Friends of the Earth did a study where they showed pesticides in water, and I believe there was also a study there that showed it in rainwater. And here's a study done, it's on ams.usda.gov, a national study of municipal, household, and school wells conducted by the U.S. Department of Agriculture showed 40 different pesticides in drinking water. And the Moms Across America pilot study in America showed 70% of the water that we tested, which was our supporters, that sent in their samples, which was, I believe, around 40 samples, they tested positive for glyphosate. Some were at levels of around 8.7, and others were at the levels of 0.33 parts per billion, or UGLs. So, no, the 8.7 was in urine, 0.086 parts per billion up to 0.33. And so these levels are low according to the standards of what's acceptable in water, but they're very high according to the samples, the standards of scientists and mothers who believe there should be zero glyphosate in water at all, and 0 pesticides as well. To put this in perspective, however, I figured out that the 0.086 amount of glyphosate, which was in our drinking water here in Southern California, would have had to translate to my son whose level of glyphosate in his urine was 8.7 parts per billion. He would have had to have drunk 9 swimming pools worth of water in that one day in order for that level of glyphosate in the water to translate into that level of glyphosate in his urine. So we are clear, although the drinking water is contaminated, that that is not the primary source of glyphosate being found in human beings. We believe it's the food. So also about water, a national study found pesticides in 90 to 100% of streams tested. This includes all different kinds of pesticides. And the study is conducted by the U.S. Geological survey. So again, extremely disturbing, and also points directly to why there's been a loss of frogs, a decline in all kinds of birds, butterflies, and animal life. In fact, 30% of birds in America now, songbirds, are at risk of extinction. And this is by Mace Vaughn. He said also about butterflies that in the 1990s, hundreds of millions of butterflies would fly, would migrate down to Mexico from the northwest region down to Mexico, and today it's only 33 million. So we have lost hundreds of millions of monarch butterflies. Extremely important. And here we go. Pesticides are hazardous to fish, birds, and bees. Glyphosate, again, Roundup, has been noted by the EPA due to the presence of a toxic inert ingredient. Some glyphosate end-use products must be labeled toxic to fish. So, when I was growing up, I grew up in Connecticut with a small pond, and we would have guests over at the summertime from the city, and they would say to my father, I don't want to swim in there, there's fish in there. It was not a pool, it was a pond with lily pads and frogs and fish, and it was fed by a stream. And my dad said, I wouldn't want to swim in anything where there wasn't living things in there. And that made a lot of sense to me. If water kills something, if chlorine in the water, or if there's pesticides in the water that kill things, if they kill fish, why would you want to swim in it? Why would you want to drink it? You don't. So chlorpyrifos, a single application of this chemical poses risk to small mammals, birds, fish, and aquatic invertebrate species for nearly all registered outdoor uses. Multiple applications increase the risk to wildlife and prolong exposures to toxic concentrations. So even one application can hurt the wildlife, and multiple applications prolong the exposure. Just disturbing. And this chlorothalonil effects on avian reproduction have been observed at a dose of 5 parts per billion, which is very highly toxic to fish as well. So again, we're talking parts per billion. This is like equivalent of 5 drops of water in an entire swimming pool. Very, very small amounts can affect changes in the reproductive organs of birds. Rachel Parsons was inspired by, she inspired the entire pesticide reform movement. She's the author of Silent Spring, and you want to look at what she said about the effects of DDT on birds. That's what prompted her concern about pesticides. When the birds began neglecting their eggs, when they began preferring other birds of the same sex, when they began dying off, it was something to take note of, and unfortunately our government organizations have not. The number 9 reason why we should not use pesticides is that pesticide health and safety testing is conducted by the pesticide manufacturers. How do we know to trust them? Who profits from the sale of pesticides? Well, Bayer Crop Science, Syngenta, which is also sister company to AstraZeneca Syngenta, which is a pharmaceutical company. Of course, we know Bayer is a pharmaceutical company. Dow AgroScientists make some of the most toxic chemicals out there. Monsanto, we all know Monsanto is a chemical pesticide company, GMO seed company, and their parent company was Pharmaceutical Upjohn at one point, which is a pharmaceutical company. And DuPont, of course, says the miracles of science. I would disagree with that. Their chemicals are highly toxic, and there's many other. So who tests the pesticides? Bayer Crop Science, Syngenta, Dow AgroSciences, Monsanto, and DuPont. That's who tests them. So they get to say that their chemicals are safe, and we have to deal with the repercussions. Number 10, pesticides have way too many secrets. The fact is that, as I said before, 80,000 chemicals have been invented since the 1940s, only a few hundred have been tested, and only a handful, I believe the number was around 12 or 14, have actually been removed from the market. Those are chemicals like PCBs have been banned after they were found in breast milk in the Alaska Inuits, and DDT was banned after it was found to be toxic. Of course, after they told everybody that it was safe, and children played in the mist that was being sprayed as it ran down the street. You know, the kids used to run in the back of the trucks and play in the spray. And unfortunately now DDT is being found to be unearthed by a particularly deep crawling earthworm up in the northwest region. I believe it was in Oregon or Washington, that found that birds were dying because of DDT pollution, because they were eating earthworms that dug way down into the earth, went down several feet into the soil, and were coming in contact with DDT that had been left there from years and years and years ago. This is not something that any of the manufacturers of DDT ever imagined that would happen. And the point is that there are too many secrets about pesticides. There's too many possible impacts of harm and loss and sickness and death and illness to pesticides. So this is why we need to advance sustainable communities. And if you want more information about this, more information about pesticides, please go to the Center for Environmental Health. Carolyn you're able to reach Carolyn there, and I will have more of this information on momsacrossamerica.com. And I want to thank you for your time, and thank you very much for being with us today. If you have any other questions, please let us know. Go to momsacrossamerica.com. What you can do about this is to tell your neighbors, to tell your friends, and to share with them about Roundup, about pesticides, about neonicotinoids. Did you know that most seeds are now coated with neonicotinoids, and that is what has been connected with the bee dial? So Moms Across America has seed packets that we sent out to our leaders. You can do something similar if you like. We had a little flyer that just said, please help save bees, plant these very pretty seed flowers, and please stop spraying Roundup. And if we go for a Roundup-free neighborhood all across the neighborhood, all across the country, we can make a difference. We can stop the toxic pollution of our children, our dogs, our birds, our bees, our butterflies, the essential life on our planet. We can make a difference. So please just go out there and greet your neighbor and talk to them about it and ask them to stop spraying Roundup and buy only organic seeds. Thank you so much for your time, and please visit momsacrossamerica.com, volunteer, help out, and join us. Thank you.